The first sound is wind, thin, sharp, restless, moving through a forest that has not changed in 800 years. Beneath its branches lies the memory of a girl whose name was scarcely whispered in her own time, yet whose story echoes far beyond it. This is the story of Anika, a girl of the 13th century. A girl born into fear, into suspicion, into a world where silence could be safer than truth and where knowledge could be mistaken for witchcraft. Across Europe, the Middle Ages were defined by uncertainty. Plague, famine, superstition, and relentless struggle shaped the rhythm of every village. In the corners of society, between the shadows of forests and the walls of crops, lived the people who were different: the midwives, the gatherers, the healers, people who carried knowledge older than churches, older even than kingdoms. People like Anika. And it was often these women who paid the highest price for that knowledge. Anika was born in a small settlement at the edge of a vast woodland, what chroniclers sometimes called the wolf forests. She was the daughter of a woodcutter, a quiet man who worked from dawn until exhaustion. Her mother died giving birth to her, and from that moment, Anika's presence became complicated. A motherless child in the Middle Ages was a symbol of misfortune. A child delivered on a night of strange weather, thunder without rain, wind without storm, could be seen as an omen. And so, from her first breath, Anika lived under the weight of superstition. Her father, worn and grieving, did what he could, but grief hardens some people and isolates others. By the time Anika was old enough to gather berries or fetch water from the river, most villagers already avoided her. Children whispered about her. Adults lowered their eyes when she passed. But the forest did not fear her. The forest, unlike the village, welcomed her curiosity. She spent hours beneath the canopies, touching leaves, smelling bark, following the thin streams that carved through moss. It was there she met the one person who would shape her life more than anyone else: Old Merith, a widowed herbalist who lived in a small, leaning hut where the forest and fields met.
Merith was everything the village distrusted: solitary, knowledgeable, unafraid. But she knew plants, truly knew them, their cures, their dangers, their seasons. She saw Anika watching her from a distance day after day, and instead of turning her away, she opened her door. This simple act of kindness changed everything. Merith saw immediately what others refused to see: a sharp mind, hungry to understand the world. Anika memorized every leaf, every root, every mixture. The village eventually noticed when small miracles began happening. A child with a fever recovered after Anika brought a tea of willow bark. A shepherd's wound healed faster with her poultice. An old woman's joints loosened after an infusion of nettle and mint. But medieval gratitude was a fragile thing. People accepted her gifts while ignoring her. They thanked her without ever truly trusting her. Healing was welcome, but healers were not, especially young women who knew too much. And then came the winter that changed everything. It was the harshest winter in decades: cold that choked the air, frost that twisted wood beams, sickness that seeped through stone walls. Many fell ill, some never recovered. The village priest prayed, but prayers alone did not stop the cough that rattled chests or the fever that burned eyes. The villagers went to Anika. Desperation makes people reach for whatever hope they can find. And Anika did not turn them away. For days she worked without sleep, brewing herbs, warming cloths, whispering comforts, and the sick began to improve. But with recovery came fear. When people do not understand how healing works, they search for the supernatural. And where they search for the supernatural, they often find evil, whether it exists or not. The turning point came with the death of a young noble visitor, the son of a minor lord traveling through the region. He fell ill, and despite Anika's best efforts, the sickness claimed him. His family grieved, but the villagers panicked. They whispered that Anika had tried to heal the wrong person, that perhaps she had caused the illness, that her herbs were not natural, that the forest had taught her things not meant for mortals. Rumors became conclusions, conclusions became accusations. The priest began referencing scriptures about sorcery. People remembered how Anika's mother had died in childbirth. They remembered the strange storm the night she was born. The mind, frightened and ignorant, creates shapes in the darkness, and those shapes often take the form of a villain. Anika sensed the shift long before she understood it. Doors no longer opened when she knocked. Children no longer smiled when she approached. Even the weak avoided her remedies, preferring to suffer rather than risk the unknown.
Marith tried to protect her. "Knowledge is a blade," she warned, "and the world fears those who wield it." But Marith was old, and age could not shield Anika from what was coming. One night, a villager, a man whose daughter Anika had once healed, fell sick again. His wife refused Anika's help, insisting that God would cure him. When the man died the next morning, grief turned instantly into fury. The wife screamed that Anika had cursed them. Others joined, their voices rising like a storm. By noon, a mob had gathered. Torches glowed, shouts filled the air. The priest announced that Anika must face judgment. In the Middle Ages, judgment often meant something much darker. They dragged Anika to the village square. She did not fight. She looked confused, hurt more by betrayal than fear. She tried to speak, but her words drowned beneath accusations. Witch, forest spirit, devil's daughter. The priest demanded a confession, but how could she confess to something that was never real? When she refused, they decided she would undergo a trial by water, a common method in that era. If she floated, she was a witch. If she sank, she was innocent, but likely dead. As they bound her wrists, Marith tried to stop them. The old woman threw herself between Anika and the crowd, shouting that knowledge was not witchcraft. But fear is louder than truth. They pushed Marith aside. Some claimed she had bewitched them both. They dragged Anika to the river, the same river where she once collected water as a child, the same river that had never judged her. The water was cold, brutally cold. They tossed her in, and Anika sank. For a moment, she disappeared beneath the surface, her hair fanning like dark ink, the ropes pulling her down. But the fear gripping the villagers was stronger than reason. They interpreted her sinking as a sign she was trying to escape judgment. Men waded in, dragged her back up, gasping, coughing, half-conscious. They tied her tighter. And they made their decision. A pyre was built,
Dry branches, broken boards, old straw. Anika stood silently as they said it. Her eyes did not beg. They only searched for something, perhaps a memory of the world she once believed in. Marith held her hand until the last moment, but even she was forced away. The fire was lit. For a brief second, the villagers waited for something miraculous, for the flames to recoil, for magic to reveal itself, for the sky to darken. They expected fearsome proof of the evil they imagined. But nothing happened. There was no curse, no devil's scream, no unnatural flame, only smoke rising into the indifferent sky. When it was over, silence remained, a silence heavier than any prayer. In time, the villagers regretted what they had done. Stories spread. Some said their crops failed. Others said wolves returned to the forest. Some even claimed they saw a girl in a blue dress wandering by the river at dusk. But regret cannot undo history. Marith buried what remained of Anika near the forest, using herbs Anika herself once prepared. The old healer lived only a few years longer, but before she died, she told a traveling scribe the truth, that Anika was not a witch, but a healer, one of the very last taught in the old tradition. Centuries passed. The story nearly vanished, but traces survived in regional records, fragmented, incomplete but unmistakable, enough to hint at a life extinguished too early and a world that mistook knowledge for sorcery. And now we remember her, not as a witch, not as a curse, but as a girl who tried to help in a time when help itself was feared. A girl whose only crime was understanding what others did not. A girl swallowed by superstition, yet preserved by memory. This is Anika's legacy, a reminder of the lives lost to ignorance, a reminder that truth and fear are often enemies, a reminder that every witch burned in the Middle Ages was perhaps someone like her, not wicked, not cursed, simply human. And in the quiet places of ancient forests, where the wind moves through branches older than kingdoms, some say Anika's story still lingers, a whisper, a warning, a plea for a world that sees knowledge not as danger, but as light.